In this session, we'll be talking about roles and role hierarchies, and let's see what they are. Roles. Users are assigned to roles to define their position in the organizational structure. Roles can be used for various purposes, such as sharing rules, which determine the level of access users have to records. Okay, so by using roles, we can also give access to records. And then we also have role hierarchies. Users with higher role can typically access the records owned by users below them in the hierarchy. This access can be leveraged to ensure that managers have visibility into the records owned by their subordinates. For example, if manager will basically usually have a higher role in the role hierarchy, and if that's the case, then they will be able to see records that belong to the users under their role hierarchy. So if we go to role hierarchy from here, and we can see that there's a role hierarchy. So that means if somebody has a CFO role or CEO role, for example, that user can see records that belong to CFOs, COOs, SVPs, SVP, and marketing, and all the users that belong to other roles under them. If one user have, for example, director channel sales role, then that user will have access to records owned by a user with this role, for example. Okay, that's how we can use the role hierarchy. Role hierarchies determine whether users have access to records owned by someone below them. We just talked about that. In order to provide record access using role hierarchies, grant access using hierarchies option should be enabled. So if we go to sharing settings, let's navigate back to sharing settings. And then there is this grant access using hierarchies option. And if this option is selected, which this is always going to be selected for standard objects, but for custom objects, we have an option to select that or not select that. And when that is selected, it means user in a higher role will be able to see records that owned by a user under their role in the hierarchy. Okay, that's what grant access using hierarchies mean. So if your role is salesperson, if that's your role, then the sales manager role will be able to see the records that you create, for example. So in this scenario, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be demoing this and how it works. So I'm going to demo how this access, how the access to our custom student object can be controlled by using that grant access using hierarchies option. So why this is necessary, because if OWD is set to private, then users will not be able to view other users' records. Okay. So, and usually this OWD for records would be set to private. Okay. You will not see in the organizations, you will not see most of them, you will see most of them set to private. That means users should by default should only be able to see their own records. For example, think about this student object, and here we have student object. The OWD is set to public read write, and if we change that to private, then users will not be able to see each other's records. But by selecting this checkbox, we can allow their managers to see their records. Okay, so let me go back to my use case and see what is asking us to do. Before trying this configuration, verify that the test user does not have this access on the student object, modify all, view all, or system modify all data or view all data permissions. Also verify that there is no other active sharing rules that share records with other users. So basically, in our case, this does not apply to us because we haven't done that or configured those sharing settings. Because if we have, we're going to talk about this, what this access do in the future. Whenever you give this access, that gives extra access to the users. Okay, we want to make sure the users don't have this access so that we could demo this. So currently, if I go back to sharing settings, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to private. Okay, I'll change the student access to private and save. What that means is, it means users will only be able to see student records that belong only themselves, right? So let me go to here I'm logging in or testing as a test user. If I try to check the student records, and let's switch to all student records, and this test user can only see this one record because that belongs to him, but the test user cannot see records that belong to, for example, the admin user. All right. And in this scenario, what I want to do is I want to also make sure that grant access using role hierarchy is enabled for the student object. Okay, this is already enabled. And I also need to make sure is our test user, if I want the test user to see records of the student object, I also have to make sure that the test user's role is higher than the admin's role. Okay, so by using this grant access using hierarchies, we can share records. As an admin, if I want to share my records with the test user, I need to make sure first grant access using hierarchies is selected for that object. That's first thing. Second thing, what I need to do is I need to make sure that the test user's role is higher than my own role, which is the sysadmin. So first requirement is complete. Grant access using hierarchy is selected for this object. Next, what I need to do is I need to go to roles and change the test user's role. Okay, set up role, and as you can see, currently, the test user has this Western sales team. Okay, Western sales team, and if I click on assign, you can see that the test user has that role. And if I want to change it, for example, what I want to do is I will go back, okay, and I'll go back to our users and edit the user, change their role, make their role CEO, save, and I will come back to my admin user and change the admin user's role to something that is below the CEO, okay? So I'm gonna make this one to CFO, for example, and save. So what that means is, if my test user's role is higher than the other user's role, which in this scenario, the admin user, and if that grant access using hierarchy is selected for that student object, then my test user should be able to see the student records. This is from the previous session. Let me refresh this page. And as you can see, the test user is now able to see records that belong to the admin user. All right. So if I go try to edit this one, is able to edit, because even though OWD is set to private for the student object, okay, the test user's profile has edit access to student object, and they are able to edit student records, even the student record in this scenario belongs to the admin user. All right. So a couple things happening here. Again, to reiterate, our test user is able to see admin users' records because of this grant access using hierarchy checkbox is selected, and because our test user's role is higher than the admin user's role. Okay, compare these two. And they are also able to edit records. The test user is also able to edit records that belongs to the admin user. That's because their profile, the test user's profile, has that access to edit student records. So this is how grant access using role hierarchy, OWD, and profile access all work together. Now in this scenario, if I go ahead and change the test user's role, for example, change the test user's role back, I'm going to change it back to Western Sales Team and save. And then what will happen is that will remove the access from our test user to see student records that belong to other users. Let me switch to other list view here. You see, as you can see, the test user can no longer see student records that belong to other users. That's because I changed our test user's role here to Western Sales Team. It is now lower role than the admin user's role. Even though in the sharing setting, this box is selected, the grant access using hierarchy box is selected for this object, just because the user's role is lower than the admin's role. And because of that, the other user, which is our test user, is no longer able to see records that belong to our admin user. Okay. Now let me do one more change. I'm going to give the role back to our test user, and then I will uncheck that grant access using hierarchy option. So let me give him the CO role back, and that will again give the permission back to our user to see the other records. And if I go to the sharing setting and remove that or uncheck that box, the access will be removed from our test user again. So test user previously was able to see these records, but now they will no longer be able to do that. Because in this scenario, I unchecked that box. So you have to make sure the box is checked, and also the user's role is higher than the admin's role if you want to share records using the roles and hierarchies option. And I will go back and revert the access back. I'm going to check this box. And also I will change our test user's role back to its original role so that it doesn't mess up our future configurations. Okay. Save. So basically, I reverted the configuration back. Admin user, let me go update my admin user and give the CEO role back, because our demo is over on that topic. And I want to make sure I undo those configurations.